Hello, welcome back. Oh, I can't believe it. It's our last session for the day. Again, I can't thank the audience, are very, I think, committed, immersive, and very active conversations between panelists themselves, among them, and then with our incredible group here today. So thank you all. Please keep it up. And so with our last panel, please join me in welcoming. We've got Kara Beck, who is the VP Human Resources with Starbucks Coffee Canada, and Catherine Zhu, the global partner with Egon Zehnder International, who also happens to be an alum. And our conversation today, so similar to this morning's, the opening panel, for closing panel, I'm going to act as sort of the light moderator, introducing the overarching theme and really have the two of you engage a conversation and integrate as many of questions as possible. And so the big topic, which again has just been spoken about in the panel with Jeanette and Blair and continues to be a very critical topic, is about leadership. Redesigning leadership is critical. It's the crux. It's ultimately the make or break for sustainable organizations and I'd say durable societies. So I'm going to start with Catherine. As a leadership talent, as a talent recruiter, really in the leadership domain, as an advisor, can you maybe begin today's conversation around leadership on maybe introducing some of the trends, some of the factors influencing sort of this new, net new, or possibly even next gen types of leaders. And then I'll introduce Kara in terms of the same conversation.
Great, thank you, Angel. Thank you for having me here. I love the energy and insight has shared this morning. It reminds me of my time at Rotman 20 years ago. It's that collaborative spirit. One builds on the other's ideas. I think that's part of the new leadership trend we're seeing. So to answer your question, why we're reimagining leadership, what has changed? So I think the very fact that we're connecting with each other in this format is indicative of the time we live. We live in a time of deep disruption. So while people see lives literally vanished in front of their eyes, and they see accelerated climate change, as well as geopolitical uncertainties, one cannot help but wonder what is the purpose of work. So the conversation we're having with the leaders as a global leadership advisory firm, Egon Zehnder, we're privileged to work with the boards, CEOs, and their leadership team on a daily basis on what is leadership and how we're going to attract, motivate, and retain talent. The conversations about leadership has very much shifted from competency-based to identity-based. And what I mean by that, we have just done a survey recently with 1,000 CEOs globally. 45% of them reflected that not listening is a big blind spot. And to call that out is actually very assuring for a lot of us. And then 97% of them said that the biggest task facing leaders today is to transform self while transforming their organizations. Only 3 years ago, for the same survey, only 79% of people feel there's a need to transform themselves. So in a way that COVID has had a material impact on how leaders, at least at the CEO level, think about themselves. The overarching theme we have got from talking to the CEOs is that what have got them here will not get them there. So let me just pause here, and I think we would love to hear more from Kara, and we can elaborate more. What are some of the emerging themes of leadership?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so, yeah, Kara, over to you. Now, you have spent nearly 2 decades fostering talent inside Starbucks and across the borders between the US and Canada. So to build on Catherine's question here in terms of some trends and factors, but specifically in your case, in terms of learnings and lessons within an organization such as Starbucks.
Well, hello, Angel and Catherine, and the participants. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. it's a little shocking when you say nearly 2 decades. I still feel like, especially these days, a little bit like that naive newcomer to my role in HR. I would say, some of my key learnings, and especially over the last 2 years, have been really paying close attention and having clarity of the current state while having this dual view around optimism for the future. And I have to say, that's been tough through the pandemic. There's been a lot of day-to-day work that we've done and kind of day-to-day decisions. It feels like almost every day we wake up, there's a new mandate, there's a new decision, there's something new that's happening that day. So we were in a very immediate state, but also as the leader having to think and also be optimistic about the future for the team you lead. And for me, also for my own self, that's what gets me up in the morning, is to think about the day we're kind of past this, maybe not the day, but the moment that we're past this, and we're really working towards those things that we see around an optimistic future. So that's been one key learning for me. And I try to purposely practice that each day, to really think about what's the optimistic side and what am I shooting for long term. I think the other one, and Catherine mentioned this briefly, but it's the capability elements. And the capability in my mind it's a combination of mindset, skill, and experience. It's a bundle. And it's about, thinking about our depth of experience, but also our breadth of experience. And when I talk to leaders and our partners about kind of the future of leadership, I use this phrase of up, down, around, and sideways. So up is not really the only way anymore, and thinking about your future and your career kind of in a holistic way. And then last thing, I think when I reflect on my career, I think about key lessons learned for me have just been, keep that door open, be optimistic and open-minded about what's possible. I talk a lot about not focusing on job title as much as experience. I think this goes back to even what Catherine said about, what's the purpose of work? It's got to have value and impact for you as a person. And so some of the best career transitions I've had is when I've been not so familiar with what the future might hold, but I think that there's something there for me to learn. And I think learning is really key to keep you active and agile in an ever-changing world.
Yeah, I was going to say, Catherine, to build on that in terms of, I also love that framing of the purpose of work and how deep and meaningful, and hearkening back to Tim Gallus' point of the soul. And so, yes, please add and weave in some of your own experiences in this domain.
Certainly. What we have been observing is there's a fundamental shift in the work culture. So it goes way beyond performance and results. There's ongoing conversations, not only in the boardroom at the CEO level, with our new recruits, with new college graduates, they talk about meaning and humanity. So, which then in turn reflected on the leadership. What does that mean then being a leader today? The words we're hearing is we are looking to conscious leadership, conscientious leadership. We're looking for leaders who are intentional. They're being aware of the connectedness of the world and of us as a human race. Part of that is driving it is the fact of ubiquitous social media. So leaders have no way of hiding. It's impossible to separate your personal versus professional lives or even values when you live in all these Zoom meetings. I spoke to a COO of a global media company recently. She just resigned. She got burned out. After having lived in this totally transparent world in the last 2 years in a Zoom setting, the issues that burden her is not about her work or delivering commercial results or motivating teams. It's the constant ask by external and internal stakeholders about what's your view on Black Lives Matter? what's your view about anti-Asian movement or climate change or sustainability or net zero? So she said, I need to develop a voice, but whatever I said, I will be criticized. And that is burdensome. So in her case, she said, I'm going to take time out. I need to really think about what is my purpose and how I can best be a leader. So she actually is taking a 6 months sabbatical right now. That's one small example to illustrate the great resignation we're seeing, right? At all levels, people are rethinking about their purpose and what is driving that. So come back to that CEO survey we did. We wanted to share a bit of insight we gather. We feel that some of their reflections perhaps will trickle down in different ranks of leadership. So the 3 themes emerged from the 1,000 CEOs who responded to our survey. The 3 things they feel as a leader are critical to them to be effective, but also to be sustainable, to stay sane, as they said, to actually not have to have another burnout. Number 1 is adaptive. And what they mean by that is, as a leader, they need to make sense of what's happening for others. As Professor Jennifer Berger, who's a leadership advisor in managing complex time, said, a big part of leaders' role today is to be a chief sense maker. So that being adaptive in this sense is actually to be able to not knowing the answers and be comfortable of letting go, doing, but really turning into the being. And that's very hard because most of the CEOs we have worked with globally have always valued and been rewarded for their knowing and for their doing, right? So to let go of that and tune into the being in order to connect is a big change, and it's being singled out as the number 1 emerging trend for the leader, which is being adaptable or being adaptive. You can say both. The second point is relational, and that's a very interesting one. If you think about, during the last couple of years, how comfortable you have been in terms of being vulnerable to the team you lead and really turning into what they are facing and being able to connect with them at a more fundamental level as a human. Beyond that, how often do you actually let people who are close to you at home to know that they value and you love them? I remember talking to one CEO in the survey. He shared that there are 3 types of listening. Listen to fix, listen to connect and relate, and listen to learn. And he said, for my entire career life, I'm paid to listen to fix. So as a result of that, even at home, this is a female CEO, when I listen to my husband and my son, I always try to give them answers. And that really upset them because they're not, my teenage son actually wants me to listen, to learn what he has learned. And my husband just wants me to listen and he can vent. So he wants me to listen to relate. So that relational piece was also very important in the client Microsoft that Satya has talked about in the recent conversations about the future of work. People ask him what is the most important thing to drive innovation, since they are the leader in the technology space. And he said, it's actually, we have a model for leadership at Microsoft. It's called model, being a role model, coach, and care. But beyond anything, it's the care. It's the care will create that relational quality that will change behaviors. So that's the second, relational. The third is self-awareness. And that's the piece I found fascinating. I think all of us, if we think about it, we are all conditioned either through our ancestry history, the way, the place, the time we were born, and how we were raised. So all these conditions have shaped who we are as a leader. But very literally, even at home or in the education system or at work, we have a chance to actually reflect on that. So we think we are this person. We even identify ourselves as the job holder, which I think is quite risky, because when you leave the job, who are you then? So that knowingness, being aware of what have shaped us, is the beginning of self-awareness. And without that, we will be forever trapped in the person we think we are, and often is that doer or that executive, and we'll have real hard time to move forward. We will literally be in our own way. So let me just pause here. Love to hear, Carla's view and the audience. How do you think about these three trends of being adaptive and being relational, as well as raise that self-awareness as a leader?
Yeah, over to you, Kara.
Sure. I was looking at some of the comments in the chat too. So I love there's some connections between sustainable and successful leaders, the adaptability and the relational. I guess as I listen to Catherine and read some of the chat, I feel fortunate because Starbucks, when I think about our mission and values, and I know most, if not every company has mission and values, I feel fortunate because our mission and values are really core to who we are. They have been for 50 years now. And I just feel like they're even more poignant in the world we're living in right now. So our mission is to inspire and nurture the human spirit. And so if you think about that, we talk about it one person, one cup, one neighborhood at a time. But when you think about our core is to inspire and nurture the human spirit. So as a person that comes to work every day, that's what I get to do. That's pretty cool. And it's also what we live every day. And so I think this world that's so dependent on empathy and leaders who can relate to their partners, who can be vulnerable with, let me correct, I saw it in the chat, but we call our employees partners. So I'll just clarify, I should have done that up front. But as we think about how our leaders relate to those partners and have empathy for what they're experiencing and the massive change that they're living in right now, being able to be vulnerable, share what they're feeling in the moment, and have that be relatable for the partner and vice versa, I think is critical. And I feel fortunate because that's been a core of how we've operated this business for 50 years. I reflect on back to one of the points Catherine made too around performance. Howard Schultz, I believe it was back in 2014, made a comment that stuck with our company for ever since around performance driven through the lens of humanity. And that's always been about, we are a for-profit company, and we also look at how we can help make the world a better place. And that may seem bold for, a coffee shop, but I think we definitely are for profit around coffee, but our goal is to help people have a wonderful experience, to change the way they feel when they come into our stores. And that's how we lead. We enable and empower our partners to be able to deliver those best moments to their customers and create that moment in their day that leaves them with a smile on their face or a sense of belonging when they come into our store. And that's been really challenging in the changing environment. And so we've had to think about that in the way that we lead. How do we show up in that vulnerable way for our partners to give them the space to express what they're feeling and experiencing? Lots of change, fear sometimes, uncertainty, and create an environment where they feel included and where they belong, so that they can in turn share that back with our customers. And so while, I think sometimes people think of it as just a cup of coffee, it's really about how we as leaders are creating that environment for others. I would add, this was just a recent experience we had this week with our leadership team, and we had Paula Allen, you may know her, she's an SVP with LifeWorks. She's also a University of Toronto alum. She came and talked to us about the impact of the pandemic on senior leaders, and some of the stats she shared were pretty staggering. And for us, it was just a moment as a leadership team to acknowledge, like, oh yeah, this is impacting us as well. So we've got to kind of put on our own oxygen mask when we think about how we care for and support our partners. But she did a recent survey. It was more than 1,000 senior leaders, and 82% of those leaders, that was 8 in 10, were reported that they were exhausted and that their mental health was suffering. And so for us, we talked about that as a leadership team. How do we support each other? How do we ask for help is one of our STAR skills, we call them. But really, be vulnerable in the moment to lean on each other so that we in turn can and be better for our partners and those that we serve.
That's great. And I'm just wanting to connect the dots, Kara, between what you just said and Penelope's question in the chat. And Catherine, perhaps you have some thoughts on this as well, would be, given this shift in the role or attributes of leaders, and how do leaders reshape, rethink how they can be or become or belong? And so Penelope asked, is coaching an important concept? And so what perhaps is this evolving role for leaders when it comes to being present, being purposeful, a sense of belonging, and what is that relationship with leadership and perhaps, of course, purpose and ultimately impact inside organizations? It's a big one. I'm going off script. And I know, Catherine, I know Kara's got a few specific programs, but Catherine, did you want to jump in with some thoughts in terms of all the work you're doing with leadership development?
Yes. So it's an interesting one. What's the point of being a leader, right? What is there to do as a leader? That's often how managers started. And I think the conversation we're hearing now is that actually the point of a being leader is a being, not the doing. You can, even as efficient, as productive you are, you cannot go in to do their work for your teams. So what else then is left is then be with them. I think that being present has been the hardest thing for a lot of leaders, because often we all have a running agenda in our head. But even when you attend the conference, when you listen, you constantly, your mind is running all the time. And the mind, I think, is the biggest enemy in being a leader. So mind has its own agenda, and you wanted to insert, you wanted to question, you wanted to follow up. Anytime we do that, we actually lose the quality of the being, which is creating that safe space. So let me maybe share an example what I learned from reading Satya's book called Hit Refresh, when he took over the CEO role at Microsoft 8 years ago. I think the first thing he wanted to do is to have his leadership team, which used to be his peers, to align on their purpose. Now, again, we come back to the word of purpose, but the way he did that was quite interesting. He basically every Friday get them together. Some of you might have read the book or heard the story. What struck me was the way he asked them to sit down on Friday morning and talk about what is our purpose. And people would just say, wow, why are we wasting time? Why we have so many customers to serve, products to develop. And then he uses silence. He doesn't say anything. And so then, it's until someone says something, otherwise the meeting will not end. So eventually people start to say something. And when they start to say something, because it was such a silence, you paid attention, you listened. So the quality of listening really turned up. And through that, the mind starts to move out of the way, and the whole beings start to come out. People start to talk about what really concerns them in their lives. And that is the beginning of the empathy. So at the end, after 6 months of that silent, then listen, silent again, and then listen, they landed on one word, which is enabling, which is not too different than Kara's sharing in terms of Starbucks mission, right, through the lens of humanity. So they landed on what are enabling. So you will not be enabling others if you don't have empathy. And you wouldn't have empathy if you cannot tap into your own being. So come back to your question, how we're doing on leadership development. As a firm, we used to help clients to look for leaders. We realized no matter how efficient we are, there are not enough leaders to come in and adapt to a new culture and organization. So we have shifted in the last 5 years to more on developing leaders with our clients. And the development work has folks, we work with an organization globally called Mobius. So it's based on the book called Winning from Within. So the book already indicates it's the enemy or the competition or the motivation, not that is outside, it's all inside, winning from within. And the starting point is to understand who we are and the archetypes through which we operate. And I will just mention very briefly the archetypes that I think is easy to understand. We typically have 4 major archetypes to operate as a leader. A thinker, typically we value our strategic thinking and logical thinking. A warrior, which is the doer side of us, right? We get rewarded for what we can do and execute and deliver. A lover very often do not show up at work because it's just too much a competitive environment for lover to exist. Although that is very much changing, and I think Starbucks Humanity Lens is speak to that lover's angle and archetype. The last one's called dreamer. Often we left the dreamer at home and we leave the dreamer to the board and to the CEO. So those 4 archetypes is the most common archetypes, although most of leaders only operate through 1 or 2. So if you think about a 4-leg stool, you are not very stable or sustainable if you operate through 1 or 2 legs and you leave those 2 untouched. So the leadership and development work we have been doing is to activate all archetypes. And COVID, in some strange way, made it easier because without tapping into your lovers, you cannot connect. You will not show up with care. And without tapping into a dreamer, you cannot make sense of what's going on because just nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So dreamer will suspend the agenda and the logic and help to tap into deeper intuitions. And that deeper intuitions will help us to go out of this, seemingly ongoing and never ending COVID situation. But together, it's the dreamer, it's the lover, and coupled with that thinker and the warrior will help us actually to energize, create that positive energy and empower everyone around us, right? So the leader's role has shifted from being a doer, a thinker, to an enabler, to someone who can create that space of psychological safety so that others may have answers than the leader, him or herself.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And to build on that, Kara, you shared with Catherine and I a few weeks ago some of the incredible work that you have been privileged to, as you say, participate in, contribute, and lead yourself in terms of especially partners development as leaders in Starbucks. Can you share a few of those interesting programs and approaches?
Sure, I'd love to. We've been we're very proud of the culture we have. And, I talked about the mission and values, but we also have acknowledged that there are some behaviors within our culture that maybe don't serve us well, and we might want to part ways with. So as a leadership team, we kind of dug into that, and we started thinking about what's the future leadership legacy, if you will, that we want to create. And what we came up with pretty simply was we want to move from a hero culture to a thriving culture. So this hero culture, which, was amplified through the pandemic, is that, at all costs, I work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, whatever it takes, with whatever, great or few resources that I have, but I'm going to win and I'm going to succeed. We still have a high bar we set for ourselves, but what we talked about is not at all costs. We need to be able to be well and healthy and alive and inspiring for the rest of our team. So we're moving into this more of a thriving culture that has balance, of focus and inclusive collaboration. So a lot to what Catherine shared. It's not that the leader's got the answer, but the leader can create the path. They can inspire, set the tone, set the stage, and open the environment for their partners, their teams to be able to create the ideas or execute. We kind of put commitments out on that work around purpose too. So purpose is clearly front and center for us. Well-being was right up there at the top. You can't take care of others until you take care of yourself. And we build that into the meetings we have. We take clear breaks. We've started doing these simple things called walk and talk. So you can't be together, but you can virtually be together. So I can take a walk around the block in Seattle while my partner in Toronto is outside trudging through the snow, and we can still have good collaborative time and get a little exercise too. Drive, excellence, and one team. This one team collaboration, we're in it together, was really important for us when we thought about what was going to help drive our future forward. So that's just a small glimpse of what we've been talking about, but it was important for us not to throw this valuable culture out, kind of baby out with the bathwater, but to re-examine that and say there probably are some things that aren't serving us well, and we need to shift away from that and shift towards something more positive in the future.
Great. And you mentioned a little earlier, Catherine, in terms of the Great Resignation. So, and we've been speaking about movements. I'm now going to connect those two dots together, and would love to hear, again, your observations, your thoughts, and perhaps some a little bit of foresight of what that may mean for organizations, both for a Starbucks organization, and Catherine, for all the various global organizations you also work with. Catherine, why don't you start us off?
So to start with the Great Resignation, it's interesting that maybe I can start with our own firm, right? Just to put a mirror on ourselves and also see the changing role of the leader, and which is really interesting. I've been reflecting on this a lot lately. So as a partnership, we are proud to be a global partnership that people actually retire from the partnership. They don't leave, but they retire. So that's pretty rare to start with. I know we're sort of a bit unique in that sense. But even us during this Great Resignation, we have partners now leave to join client organizations or to do their own startups. They realize that there's one life, and they want to do something about it beyond what they're doing, right? So that is both, it's bittersweet because we're happy for them, but of course we're also losing a couple more partners than we usually would see them retire. What's beautiful is that our chairwoman, Jill Alder, so having seen each other for more than 2 years now, she starts to write these human stories, which is something new, and it's called Human Stories. So anytime we have a colleague who's leading the partnership, she will collaborate with others to put together a few pages of pictures, quotes, people talk about this colleague. And I think that is not only to honor and acknowledge people who are moving on, who could be a great alumni, who could really change the world for better, but also for the people who stay, right? Because what she's doing is, I think she's doing both, make sense of the story. Who is that person? What was the contribution? Why he or she's moving on? And what does that mean for the rest of us? Should we still stay, right? So for the leaders who are worrying about you're losing your talent, think about their human stories, honor that, make that connections, and keep the door open. That's number one. But I think the other important quality she demonstrated in doing that is that deep level of being, right? So we're just holding that space of honoring that one person at a time. So come back to what we're going to see in the world. On one hand, we actually anticipate there's going to be more CEO turnovers in 2022. In the last 2 years, we already see an accelerated CEO turnover globally, right? This year, we think will accelerate for multiple reasons, but one underlining, silver lining, perhaps, is that people will realign their purpose and to know if that's the industry, the job they still want to carry on. But at the same time, it's also because the governance redesign, I think the last panel talked about, will also ask for different type of CEO. And from there on, different type of leaders and different type of talent. So we actually foresee more change will happen. It's not necessarily, it's a great resignation, but it is a great reshuffling. So organizations, so if what can we do about it? The three things we are learning from leaders who are doing well and who are anticipating learning to lean into this trend. Number one is unleash curiosity. I think in one of the panels earlier talked about that. Curiosity is the ingredients for self-empowerment and for development. But it's a curiosity not only about the trend of sustainability and the thoughts of others or the latest practice. It's about self. So if we can unleash that curiosity, we will have no cap of development of individuals, of leaders, and therefore as an organization. And once you turn that organization into a deliberate developmental organization, the chance you're going to attract and retain people is higher. That's a real differentiator. Number two, we find too often the diversity and inclusion becomes an obligation rather than something we embrace. Diversity was tolerated than embraced. And too often we will ask people who are diverse in terms of their thinking and experience to conform to the norm, and that's a killer of innovation. So whatever you do, do not try to force conformation for your diverse talent. And that will help you also to attract, but also retain them. I think the third point, I don't need to emphasize anymore because every panel talks about this. It's connected with purpose. Purpose at individual level, at organization level, will be that source of energy that will prevent burnout, but create that alignment that creative juice can flow and magic can happen.
Great. Kara, yes, please build upon.
I love that, how you ended magic can happen. I was talking with my talent acquisition team the other day and was curious to know, retention for us. We've got 20,000 partners across Canada. We're in a retail environment, customer facing. It's been challenging. I don't think I have to say more. But I was curious how many partners have started with us during the pandemic, and at the barista level, which is our biggest job, more than half of that population has started with us. So they only know us through the pandemic and the way we've operated behind plexi and with lots of restrictions. And so when I think about, how do we embrace that audience and those partners to ensure they know how committed we are to our mission and values, what we've done as a company in the last 50 years, one of the things, and Angel, I think we did this when we did our session with you, we start our meetings with coffee tastings. That's the core of who we are. It's our opportunity to talk about purpose, why we're here, who we are, who we serve, and the farmers that we work with. And so it's our form of storytelling. And what we started to realize is there's probably that 50%-ish of our baristas may not have that cultural connection or that feeling to the storytelling and who we are. And so that's a simple but very poignant way for us to get back to ensuring that all of our partners have that sense of a belonging and connection to the purpose of the company, but their own sense of accomplishment and achievement. So they can hear it, through those stories of their peers. Other things we do, we talk a lot we convey it when we're announcing moves, promotions, and even departures. We've started to show the career trail of a partner. Where have they worked? And what that's doing, I said early on, I talked about that up, down, around, and sideways. It's really reinforced the rich and robust career you can cultivate in our company. I've been here for almost 20 years and I've done so many things, and a lot that I never even expected. So when I talk about the kinds of different roles I've had, that's also inspiring for our team to be able to say, oh, I could do that. I could do multiple things. So I think for us, it's about, we have a partner base that is typically connected to the values of the company. We have shared values and alignment there. So it's helping them, the retention piece comes in to help them see how can they take those connected values and that alignment to the mission of who Starbucks is and build a long-lasting career, not one that's just, a moment in time or based on the current role that they have. I think the last thing I would say is communication is huge, and communicating the context, the intentional actions, and then the outcomes and that follow up. And we started Workplace Live with our store manager. So, 1,500 partners. We do it once a month. We were doing them every other week or even weekly early on in the pandemic. This is our way to be able to have consistent communication and two-way dialogue. They can ask questions. We bring in a variety of different panelists and experts in a variety of fields. We talk a lot about supply chain these days, but it's our way to really just maintain that connection through clear and consistent communication. So that's been very, very positively received as well.
Wow. Well, on that note, I can't believe we're at the end of our panel. Time is just speeding super fast today. I love this ending note in terms of communication, because it really ties beautifully to the art, the science, the business, the practice of changing, of transforming, of innovating, and ultimately even designing. And so communication is so core, and it is all of these are communication processes. So please join me in thanking Catherine and Kara. Although brief, we just got a sample, it seems, of all this incredible insight, the work you're doing actively, the way you're seeing the future of human capital development, leadership, and ultimately their critical roles in terms of sustainable organizations. So thank you both so much. And with that, I'm hoping that you'll stay here for a bit longer. I wanted to perhaps do a bit of a soft wrap up for today's event. And I wanted to start by saying, and just like that, of course, a little nod to a certain Netflix series, that we have essentially, we've come to a close of an incredibly multifaceted discussion, amazing panelists, and this is our second annual event. And so again, please, first and foremost, thank you, all of you, who have joined, who've contributed, who've participated, and have been really part of the conversation. It would not be an event without this exchange. So thank you all for joining us today.